Deep in a quiet district of Saxony, racing took place as early as the 1920s on rural public roads. Today, the Sachenring refers to the purpose-built arena near Chemnitz, one which has been a regular venue for the Sidecar World Championship throughout the modern era. Last year, the winners of both the sprint and goal races were the Birchall brothers, back to chase another victory in 2014. The Cathedral of Motorsport, Assen, was the venue for round 4 of the Sidecar World Championship. The race witnessed the return to the grid of Ben Birchall after recovery from injury, and it was the Birchall Racing Suzuki that got the whole shot. But it wasn't long before championship leaders Reeves and Clues had worked their way back from a poor race start to capture the lead. The action was down the field, with championship regulars mixing it with local wildcards, Zimmerman and Faber passing Roscher and Burkhardt for 6th. And Smits and Verbrugge overhauling Talens and De Haas for 8th. Regular combatants Makula and Asumanimi and Gurkan Weschelberger ended up colliding before the end of the race after tussling over 4th on the final lap. The number 18 continued, the Finns were out of the race. But no such dramas for Reeves and Clues, home for a 4th consecutive win. The Birchall brothers satisfied enough with 2nd place, while Streuer and Kurtz came home for 3rd in their home Grand Prix. Solid haul of points moved Ben and Tom Birchall into 2nd place in the championship, but a 51-point leading margin looks a comfortable buffer for Reeves and Clues in front. Meanwhile, down the order, 5 points separate 3 outfits in the race for 5th. Qualifying for the latest round of the championship was marred by tragedy. The number 12 outfit of Hock and Becker crashed out on the track, with passenger Enrico Becker succumbing to injuries at the scene. Preparations for the race continued in a sombre mood at the express wish of the victim's family. By the end of the first lap, several separate battles had already begun to develop. The 77 of Tim Reeves and Gregory Clues held a lead of just 0.2 of a second over Ben and Tom Birchall. The Suzuki riders were looking for a way through on the back of the early race leaders. But we saw earlier this year in Donington that Reeves and Clues know exactly how to place their machine to defend position, and they held the line well. The gap continued to narrow though, with the Birchalls the faster outfit. By the end of lap 2, they were just 0.2 of a second in arrears. A new personal best for Reeves and Clues on that 2nd lap, but the Birchall brothers had gone 8/1000ths of a second faster to narrow the gap further still. Lap 3 saw Reeves and Clues eclipse that fastest time under pressure, knocking another 0.3 off their best, with the number 16 Suzuki still buzzing around their rear. As ever, one of the most exciting battles on the track further down the order over 7th. Behind them, tucked down in 10th position, Gallern and Cheno were running 5 seconds a lap slower than that tussle. The French duo sat 8th in the championship coming into this event, but will hardly expect to make further progress in the title race. A good battle for 3rd, Zimmerman and Faber, who joined the championship last time out in Assen, taking the position from Streuer and Kurtz. Positions 5 to 8 locked close together in the early stages, with a particularly impressive display from Rutz and Hoffer to lead the pack. 5th had been their best so far this season, and they came into the weekend on the back of a disappointing race in Assen, so a strong start for them. Slightly less so for Brunazzi and Rijondo, sitting in a lonely 8th position early on, 4 seconds a lap slower than the outfit directly ahead of them. By the end of lap 2, they were 19 seconds back from the race leaders. (2013) world champion Adolf Harney now on the other side of the pits, watching on for the Birchall brothers. And they'd closed back to within 0.2 of a second of the lead, still stalking Reeves and Clues, but finding a way through was proving tougher. Deep in conversation, the veteran knows what it takes to win. Having swapped and changed positions on each of the first 3 laps, regular rivals Gürkan Weschelberger and Team Makula were now some distance apart, Roscher and Burkhardt right behind them. But the number 66 outfit would slip back and was over a second behind the Finns on lap 5. Back with the front runners, and a quarter of the way through the race, the Birchall brothers were still 0.2 of a second behind the race leaders. Tim Reeves Racing set 3 fastest lap times in 3 laps, but the Birchall brothers were keeping with them and set their own personal best on lap 5 to better the race leaders' efforts. Meanwhile, the gap between 3rd and 4th was similarly tight. Streuer and Kurtz keeping up with Zimmerman and Faber ahead. Both outfits slipping back from the race leaders at a rate of 2 seconds per lap and were 10 down by lap 5. Gürkan Weschelberger had been with them in the early stages, but would drop back. A lonely race for wildcard team Moto Mixed, who had 18 seconds of clear track ahead of them by the end of lap 4, and no great deal of pressure from Gallern and Shano behind them. Their times were inconsistent, a range of over 2 seconds between lap 2 and 5, and they never really settled into any kind of rhythm. The French duo of Huget and Piet, based in the northeast of France, ride in what they call Team Beast. Perhaps that was a reflection of how their machine was handling as they sat out at the back. Gallern and Shano ahead of them were 2 seconds faster on laps 3 and 4 and never looked back from there. Hardly an outfit's length between them, the big two were still duking it out in front. Reeves and Clues were just 5/1,000ths of a second faster on lap 6, coming to within 1,000th of a second of the Birchall brothers' fastest lap. 2 clearly evenly matched duos again. The Birchalls forced to swerve around on the back of the Kawasaki to keep up pressure. Gallern and Shano had set their personal best on lap 4, but struggled to get back on that pace again. By now, the Frenchman, whose best placing so far this year had been a 6th, sat 8 seconds back from their nearest rival. Brunazzi and Rijondo had moved up to 8th on lap 6 when Makula and Asumanini span in the first sector from 7th and went to the back. The Finns were left 12 seconds down from their nearest rival, down in 11th, and with a lot of work to do to recover. The pace of the front runners was relentless, both outfits coming within a 10th of the fastest lap again as they continued to chart their course up front. Not quite half race distance, this battle seemed to have a long way to go. After their earlier dramas, Makula and Asumanini went a lap down on lap 8 and would be looking only at minor points hauls. They'd hoped to pick off other strugglers late on as they gained ground. Still just 0.3 of a second separating Zimmerman and Faber from Streuer and Kurtz behind. The pace of the number 40 outfit on laps 7 and 8 had dropped off by about half a second, allowing their rivals to close in. Streuer and Kurtz had come to within a 10th of their personal best to take maximum advantage, and both duos were lapping in the 1:32 32s. Having moved up to 5th on lap 6, Gürkan Weschelberger were putting in a great race, gaining in successive laps with 2 personal best times. A 4-way scrap brewing. Brunazzi and Rijondo were now over 30 seconds from that battle for 3rd, but fairly comfortable in 8th as they continued to pull away from Gallern and Shano. With the 2/10 lead for Reeves and Clues looking so precarious, backmarkers that may have had a quiet race were expected to play a key role in shaping the narrative of the race in the coming laps. The front runners quickly closing up on their first victim, Uge and Piet. The race for the final podium position was incredibly close by lap 9. Streuer and Kurz looking to the inside of Zimmermann and Faber, desperate to come through, but failing to get the machine stopped in time, scrubbing off their own speed, and that allowed Gürken-Weschelberger to snatch 4th place off the turn. But a spin for Zimmermann and Faber wiped out Gürken-Weschelberger on the very next lap, and fortune had played back into the hands of Streuer and Kurz. A real shame for the number 18 that had been putting in one of its best performances of the year. The rate at which they'd been closing really suggested this was a likely podium. But it wasn't to be this time, and they were forced to call on the marshals to get started again. Pieces of bodywork as well as their outfit littering the circuit. That played into the hands of the lower order outfits, who were all to gain a place at the expense of Gürken-Weschelberger partway through the race. A personal best on lap 9 wasn't going to be enough to bring Brunazzi and Rijondo back into the pack. They were still 30 seconds back, but gaining valuable experience. Lap 10 was the 3rd successive lap in which Reeves and Clues had managed to slightly open the gap, but it was still only 2.5 tenths of a second. With the obstacle of Gürken-Weschelberger out of the way, Streuer and Kurz were free to resume their race for 3rd, 6 tenths of a second separating them from Zimmermann and Faber and the final step of the podium. Not too far behind and closing was the number 56 outfit of Rutz and Hoffer. Their 1:32 on the previous lap was over a second faster than the number 40 machine, so it wouldn't be long before they caught up the visibly narrowing margin. Makula and Asumanimi had made up the 12-second gap to Uge and Piet within 4 laps, and by lap 10 were ready to pounce and fight their way out of last place. Rocher and Burkhardt, meanwhile, were running a lonely race in 6th. Backmarkers playing their part here as the 2 lead outfits had to thread their way through the middle. Gürken-Weschelberger on the right of them as they returned to the pits following their crash, and Gallen and Shano, the other outfit, dropping back. Brunazzi and Rijondo would be the next outfit for Reeves and Clues to lap, as they now sat 1 minute 30 from the leaders. Streuer and Kurz had closed up most of the half-second gap to 3rd, but finding a way past Zimmermann and Faber had proved their stumbling block all race, and now they had less than a second to Rutz and Hoffer behind them. Makula and Asumanimi were now setting their sights on Gallen and Shano for 8th following their earlier spin, and gaining at 3 seconds a lap on the Frenchman. They were 9 seconds behind at this stage. Reeves and Clues were less than a tenth ahead of the Birchall brothers by the end of lap 11, but somehow continued to resist the pressure. The Kawasaki outfit had dropped back half a second on the previous lap, but had nonetheless blocked every attack from the number 16, and in the process restricted the progress of their rivals. Still no way through for Streuer and Kurz on lap 13. The gap between 3rd and 4th now slowly starting to open as well. But Rutz and Hoffer getting ever closer to these two, now just 6 tenths behind. Simple mathematics would tell you that if Makula and Asumanimi were closing at 3 seconds a lap, and the gap between the Finns and Gallen and Shano ahead was just 3 seconds at the start of this lap, then they'd be right on the back of the Frenchman by the end of it. And that's exactly how it panned out in the battle for 8th. Uge and Piet were still slipping back and not quite matching even their early laps as they began to tire in 10th. Imagine then the demands of being out in front, where the race was seemingly as psychological as it was physical. Makula and Asumanimi were now past Gallen and Shano, but they were 20 seconds back from their next target, with 7 laps in which to make it up. Uge and Piet, meanwhile, weren't far from being lapped for a second time, but at least they were on for a top 10 finish. Brunazzi and Rijondo were the next outfit in line for Makula and Asumanimi, and by lap 17 they'd lost 7 of their 20-second leads. Meanwhile, down the order, Makula and Asumanimi were about to be passed by the pack racing for 3rd, and Rutzenhofer had got the better of Streuer and Kurz for 4th as they continued their march through the field. The front-runners were coming up to lap Uge and Piet for a second time, and the Birchall brothers would have been hoping that could present them with the chance they needed to get through. But the number 88 outfit dived out of the way, and the Birchalls were left still a 10th back. Each time Reeves and Clues set a purple sector, so did the Suzuki behind them. Lap 19 had seen Makula and Asumanimi's pace briefly halted as they let through the leaders under blue flags. That gave the duo some breathing room. Gallen and Shano had 20 seconds of clear air either side of them. A mistake from Rutzenhofer around lap 16 had given Zimmermann and Faber some breathing room, but the 56 was clearly the faster outfit in pursuit of the podium. Lap times were wildly inconsistent for Uge and Piet, who were 3 seconds off their fastest around lap 17, but gained in speed on the final 3 laps of the race. Zimmermann and Faber just coming up the inside of the Moto Mix machine to lap the Swiss outfit, not having to deviate from the racing line, so no way through for Rutzenhofer. But they were still just fractions behind a first World Championship podium. Still with the number 56 in their pursuit of 3rd, setting a personal best on lap 19, and then gaining another second over the next 2 laps to set up a grandstand finish with Zimmermann and Faber ahead. Makula and Asumanimi there, tucked in behind the pack, but a lap down. But there was still time for some more drama. Reeves and Clues led into the final turn, but the Birchall brothers took the place coming off it. A fine win after 22 gruelling laps, and taken by just a 10th. Congratulations from Reeves and Clues to the Birchalls, who rode an excellent race not long after their comeback. Other outfits still coming into the finish, including Uge and Piet, 2 laps down. And Zimmermann and Faber, who would take 3rd by less than 0.2 of a second after a relentless pursuit from Rutzenhofer. A tough weekend for all of the outfits, but all of them had played their part in an entertaining spectacle. The Birchall brothers won all 5 races staged in Germany last year, and it seems they weren't too keen to give up that winning run, coming through at the very last to take the checkered flag. They were fast enough to match Reeves and Clues all race, but never quite quick enough to make a pass, right up until the final bend of the final lap, when a small error allowed them through. There were surprises through the race, particularly in the impressive display from Gürk and Weschelberger. The Germans could manage only 2nd and 3rd in their most recent national championship race, but looked the fastest home representatives until their unfortunate crash that left them the only non-classified runner. And as for great rides, how about that effort from Rutz and Hoffer? Looked towards the end as though they may just have enough to get on the podium. They were gaining ground with every passing lap, but spent the final 2 tours of the circuit just tucked up behind Zimmermann and Faber and unable to find a way past. An important result up front, though, in terms of the championship. The Birchall brothers just couldn't afford to go any further behind Reeves and Clues after missing the 2 races in Rijeka earlier this year. And although the 46-point championship gap looks imposing, there are still 100 points up for grabs in the title race, and 50 of them will be awarded when we return to Germany later this year. Late difficulties left Makula and Asumanimi in 8th. 3 clear races developing within 1, including the paired-off battle for the win and the separate scrap for 3rd that involved 4 different outfits at stages during the race. An excellent display of sidecar racing.
Of course, it's my first World Championship podium, but it doesn't feel like it's my place. It's somebody else's place what we are taking, and that's really hard for me. But of course, it's my first World Championship podium. I'm really happy with it, but not today.
I think we did Enrico proud by putting on such a good show. It was a real good battle between me and Ben, and it just took one mistake, and unfortunately I made one little tiny weeny little error on the last corner, and he just gave him enough room. But yeah, it's great. It was a great race and good, fair, clean fight, and there's not a lot between us, so it was good. But yeah, like Gregory said, their thoughts are with Brigitte and their girls, the Hop family. We just hope that Kurt can get better. We've had some promising news just after the race that he's slightly better than he was yesterday, so fingers are crossed for that he can come through. And we just like to send all our love to Enrico Becker's family, and yeah, it's a great loss to our paddock. They were a fantastic pair, and yeah, we just hope Kurt can pull through.
Really enjoyed the whole weekend. It's been hard work for Ben with carrying his hand injury still, so yeah, great to win here again. But the main point today is just, this goes out to Enrico and his family, and a speedy recovery to Kurt.
Gurkan Weschelberger's failure to finish the German Grand Prix means that Rutz and Hoffer close in. Their personally excellent display moves them above Roscher and Burkhardt into 4th and to within striking distance of an FIM bronze. But the championship itself has been between 2 outfits right since Croatia earlier this year, when Steinhausen Racing went out of the frame. A win for Reeves and Clues in Germany would have left them needing only 44 points from the remaining 4 races to take the crown. Instead, with the Birchall brothers coming through on the last lap, the Kawasaki crew have a harder task in the remaining rounds. Simply finishing on the podium in every race will be enough for Reeves and Clues now. But one mechanical failure and the championship chase will be reignited. The final results at the Sachenring: 3rd place and a first career podium to Zimmermann and Faber. 2nd for Reeves and Clues, whose unbeaten run comes to an end. But taking the top step for the first time since round 1, Ben and Tom Birchall.
Gratulation.